Alrighty, we clicked over to 1 o'clock. Welcome everybody. So I'll just make sure that everybody can hear me okay. I have got the window open today, so let me know if you can hear background noise, and if it's too distracting, let me know. Excellent. Looks like everyone seems to be okay. Wonderful. All right. So also, while I have you busily there in the chat, can you also see if you can see your raise your hand feature, and perhaps just give that a go for me as well? Excellent, wonderful, thank you. So we have Julie Holmes monitoring the chat session for us today, so feel free to ask your questions in the chat box as we go along, and Julie will be attending to some of those. But I'm going to minimise my chat screen just because I haven't got enough room on my screen, but I will keep the raise a hand feature open. So as we're going through our activities, what I'll ask is that once you've completed an activity, just to raise your hand so I know where everybody's at, and that way we can sort of progress through this hopefully reasonably well. All right, so today's session is on marketing yourself, and rather than it be a whole lot of me talking at you like yesterday, I'm hoping perhaps for today to be a little bit more interactive with you guys doing some activities. And I guess my aim around this is to just get you started on the process, about thinking some of the things that you may need to be considerate of when getting your message across to employers. So I just want to get you starting to engage in some of those, give you some tools that you can use, maybe refer you to some other tools that you can use in addition to some of the activities that we'll cross off today, and also just give you a different perspective perhaps to take on board when it comes to making graduate applications as well. Okay, so a bit of an overview today: personal brand, self-awareness, experiences, identifying your skills, writing achievement statements, and your elevator pitch. So we'll see how we go at getting through all of those. Okay, so in terms of job applications, I suppose, what I want you to think about, I suppose, is having reviewed a lot of resumes, I guess, over the course of my career, and also just recently, I suppose, in terms of jobs that we've been advertising and also that I've seen come through the careers fair resume doctor. One of the things, I guess, that is often a downfall for a lot of people is when they're thinking about the information that they're putting together, their headspace is solely within themselves. They're only thinking about their own experiences, their own information, what they've done in the past, and getting all that information out on paper. So their resume and their application essentially reads almost like a personal story, a little bit about themselves. It lists all their information, what they consider to be important about all the different aspects that they've included in their life. So then if you're sort of thinking about that, and that's what typical resumes might look like, what I want to really, I guess, challenge you and get you to think about today is changing your mindset to thinking about, well, when I'm putting my information out there, I'm actually giving it to somebody for them essentially to make a choice on. And when somebody's trying to make a choice, just like if maybe we go to the shop and we're looking to choose our bottle of milk for the family or for ourselves, we generally have some criteria in mind in terms of what we might be looking for in terms of that bottle of milk. And what your key criteria might be could certainly be very different from the next person. So for some of you, it might be the cost and the value for money. For some of you, it might be about whether you're lactose intolerant. Some of you might just like the pretty packaging. So thinking about, well, what the criteria might be. So we all have those criteria that we'll put into a situation, and employers are no different. So when they're advertising a position, they've got their own criteria, I guess, that they're looking for, and they're trying to satisfy those criteria. So when they're reading your application, they're looking to see, well, does this person meet my criteria? So when you put together your application, if you haven't really thought about including the information that meets that employer's criteria, then the employer hasn't really got much to assess your application by in terms of what they're looking for. So again, if it was that bottle of milk and you're thinking about choosing based on the price, for example, if you're looking at all the bottles of milk and there's a bottle of milk there that's got no price listed on it, suddenly it's going to drop out of your list of consideration because you don't know what price it is. So unless you're going to go to the extra effort of taking it up to the front counter, getting a price check, going back, putting it back in, you're not going to go through that issue if you're in a hurry. So really thinking about, okay, well, putting yourself in the mindset of the employer, what are their criteria, and then thinking about, well, the information that I've got to put across to that employer has got to meet as many of their criteria as I can. So really thinking about changing your frame of reference and putting yourself in essence into that product mode. So you're the product, you have to sell that, you have to meet the criteria so that the employer that's making that decision can choose you over the next product, essentially. So, and I guess leading on from that, there's certain things that you need to consider, I guess, and some of the common criteria, I guess, that employers are potentially looking at. And we touched on some of those things yesterday when we were looking at some of the things that employers felt were important. And obviously part of the process and part of that preparation that we spoke about yesterday is doing that research on the organisation to find out some more about them. But certainly some of the things that the employers mentioned yesterday was having students that were driven, that were ambitious, that knew where they were going, that had a clear sense of what their purpose was and what they were wanting to do. So some of that, and obviously a lot of the activities that I'm going to get you to go through today, are really about raising that self-awareness and getting you to think about some of those really important things, because that's where the important parts come in, I guess, in terms of you being able to then match yourself to the criteria of the employer, is that you need to know what information you have and what are your key selling points, etc., for you to be able to sell those to the employer and do that matching process. So one of the key things, and I think also one of the areas that often lets a lot of students down in terms of their applications, is that whole career goal, career objective that often appears at the top of your resume. For some people include it, some people don't. It's not a requirement, but when a lot of people do include it, again, it's often a very bland statement that really is not selling the individual in terms of their key skills and strengths that they bring to the organisation and what they might be able to, how they might be able to make a difference, I guess, in terms of the organisation as well. So again, they're not really taking into consideration the employer's criteria. And so often it's a really basic kind of generic kind of statement that's really not personalised to you, the individual. It's not showing you key strengths, and it's certainly not bringing in the concept of what the employer's criteria might be either. So one of the important things, I guess, is to think about, well, what are my career goals? Where do I want to take my career in the future? So what I would like you to do is maybe make a few quick notes. I'm not expecting you to write an essay here. Just think about, well, what's your career goal for when you graduate? I'm not expecting lots of information here, but if you can quickly note down, well, what is my career goal? You might just note down, well, what is the position that I'm looking for? What role do you want to have when you graduate from the university? Once you've jotted that down, raise your hand for me so I can see that you've got that sorted. All right, looks like the majority of you have gotten through that. Okay, so you've been able to kind of identify where it is that you want to be once you graduate. Now, for some of you, you may have just put down a position title, that's fine. And where you want to get to, I guess, is being able to expand on that a little bit more. And hopefully we'll get to some of that along the way. But I really want to thank you. If you were struggling to articulate you know, just that position title, then maybe it is a case of really stepping back and thinking a little bit more, okay, well, what is it that I want, you know, once I graduate? Or maybe if you are really struggling around that, then maybe booking in to speak with Julie or myself is another option there as well. So So the next thing I want you to think, well, after that first career goal, where might you want to be in 2 years beyond that? Employers are going to be expecting you to be thinking a bit longer term. So you've got to take some time to really think about, okay, well, this is the immediate goal. And often with our career objectives that we're listing, that's all that a lot of people focus on, is just that immediate goal. So it's really not showing that you've got that ambition and that drive to move yourself forward in your career. So thinking a little bit beyond that, where might you want to be, say, after 2 years? You've got 2 years of experience under your belt. Where might you want to be, say, after 2 years? Again, take some thoughts around that and quickly make a quick note or two, and then pop your hand up, raise your hand and let me know how you're going. Alrighty, it looks like the majority have been able to get through that one. Okay, that's good. Excellent. Okay. So as you start thinking further ahead, you might be starting to think about, how you want your career to progress. So it might be thinking about, well, higher level positions. It might be about different types of experiences that you want to add in. It might be about the type of organisation that you would like to be working for, or in what capacity. And again, the capacity, if you're thinking about moving up into different types of roles, then the level of responsibility and the types of activities and roles that you might be undertaking in those might be slightly different. So it's starting to give you maybe some more information about some of the things that might be important to you as well, and that maybe you're looking for in your career going forward as well. So let's think about that a little bit more and extend on that a little bit more. Where would you want to be a little bit beyond that? So 5 years time. So again, same process, thinking, okay, 5 years from there, where would I like to ideally be there after that? Again, just raising your question. Thinking also about some of the things that might come into play in your lives might also be something that you want to consider as well. Excellent. Again, it looks like the majority of you have gotten through that as well, which is really great. So it's really good to see that you've maybe given some thought to this. Some of you might be struggling a little bit with having given this some thought. For other people, they might be really quite clear. But again, just having a look at, okay, well, what is my 5-year goal, and thinking about and extending on that a little bit more in terms of, well, just looking around, well, the type of organisation, has it included going for an organisation that's based overseas? So is travel maybe one of the things that's one of your considerations? Thinking about where the organisation that you want to work for might be located. Is it an organisation that's based regionally? Is it something that's based in a metro area? Or is the opportunity that where you would like to be, is that opportunity going to be available in your local area, or is it something that you may have to move for? You know, so thinking around some of those other aspects is going to give you some more information that you might need to also be considerate of, and that you can also factor in terms of, okay, well, this is information that's important to me in terms of what might be some of the underlying values and things that are important to me in terms of my career and where I want to go forward, in terms of the type of organisations that I might need to be considering from that career goal where you first start, or going back to the first one, that will allow me to get to my career goal in 5 years' time. So again, it's about giving you information that you can then utilise in terms of determining whether where you want to head in your career is matched up maybe with your initial employer that you're looking for. Are they going to be a good stepping stone? You might not necessarily be with the same employer in 5 years' time, but that initial employer you might want to use them as a really good stepping stone to allow you to progress to where you want to go. So thinking about utilising some of that information to really be able to match yourself and choose your employers and do that values matching directly to your the employers that you're considering for your graduate positions as well. Now, I'm going to challenge you a little bit in this one, in that some of you might be really clear and you might not have any changes, but if you could have any job at all when you graduate, with there being no obstacles, there's no barriers, nothing at all, what would it be? Again, once you put it down, pop up your hand. Excellent. Looks like most of you were pretty quick off the mark, which might mean that your career goal is the same. So it was pretty easy. But if it wasn't, it's important to maybe think about, okay, well, what's the difference, and where are the values difference? What are the things that are coming into play in terms of those two career goals? And is there a way to bring those two closer together? Or is there something that you need to consider? If there was no barriers and your career goal is very different to where you are ultimately looking, is there something that you need to think about? And what are the factors that are around that? And are they truly obstacles that would prevent you from doing that? What are some of the barriers that maybe you're putting in place for yourself in terms of maybe achieving some of that ultimate goal? So just thinking around some of those things, I think, can be really important as well, and can sometimes be useful just to change our perspective on things and just to shore up that, yeah, it is something that's really important to us as well. So I've got one more challenge. So if you put in a lotto ticket on the day you graduated and won $1 million or two, what would you do? So just thinking about that, and I think sometimes this is an interesting question, because for some people, it would mean that they might go in a completely different direction. And I think sometimes if that's the case, it might be thinking about, well, what's the direction that you do want to go in? What are some of the things that you're looking for in that career if you had the opportunity that you could do it? So just thinking around some of those things. For others, it might be a case of, well, it just allows maybe some of the other things around the side, but I would still ultimately be wanting to do what I wanted to do, but obviously it just takes some pressure off, makes my life a little bit easier. But I think it's an interesting perspective to think about in terms of, well, I might throw up some other ideas. It might give you some room for thought, I suppose, in terms of your career direction, your career goals, where you might ultimately like to be. And maybe if that thing that you said that you'd do if you did win that $1 million hadn't appeared in any of your other career goals before, is it something that you do want to factor into your career plans maybe in the future? Is it something that is still attainable that you might be able to do, but maybe it's a longer term project that you need to maybe consider and factor into your career planning going forward as well? So just some ideas and just some different ways, I guess, to get you thinking around where I want to be. And often we don't take the time to think about it, and it's easy once you're in the throes of your studies, and especially when you're trying to meet all those assessments, etc., to sometimes lose sight of the goal of what you're doing your study for and where you want to be, and ultimately long term beyond that initial graduate position, where you want to be. And it's important to keep in touch with that and to try and reflect some of that in your initial job application as well, and to be thinking about that in terms of the type of organisation you might choose and where you want to go to help facilitate that process moving forward. Okay, so let's move on from career goals. So another little activity for you. As I said, I'm getting you to do more of the work today than what I'm doing, although I seem to still be talking a lot. Anyway, so in terms of values, what I'd like you to do on your piece of paper, make sure you've got enough room on your piece of paper. See if you can put together two columns. On one side I want important, and one side I want unimportant. What I'm going to do is flash up some values. It's by no means an extensive list of values, but I'm going to flash up some values, and what I want you to do is write down that value on either the unimportant side or the important side. Okay? I'm not going to give you a huge amount of time. I want you to go with your gut reaction, and you can spend some time later putting some additional thought and some ideas around it. Are we all good to go? Show of hands. Everyone ready and prepared? Excellent. All right, here we go. Hopefully all my animations are all working okay. Let's go. Accomplishment. Advancement. Affiliation. Altruism. Challenge. Community. Contact with people. Competition. Creativity. Economics. expert, flexibility, independence, integrity, learning, physical challenge, power, pressure, prestige, recognition, risk, routine, security, teamwork, variety, working alone. All right, so that's the last of the values. So it'll be interesting to see if you've got a really long list of really important to me or not important to me. But one of the activities that I want you to think about is, one, this gives you some values, and there's part of this is about knowing yourself and knowing what's important to you. So again, that you can do that matching process. But also, I guess, in terms of looking for organisations that will allow you to meet those core values and what's important to you. Now, I'm not going to say that you're going to be able to necessarily find a position that's going to be able to allow you to satisfy every single one of your values all the time. And that's part of the process. And what I'd like you to think about going forward as well is, okay, what are the really important ones? In terms of the ones that you've listed on the most important to me side, can you then go through and, not necessarily now, but go through and put them in a rank order in terms of most important to least important? What would you be willing to sacrifice in terms of a career opportunity, and that knowing that your opportunity might not be able to necessarily satisfy all of those key criteria, but it starts to give you a bit of an idea of maybe what you're looking for and what's going to be important to you. Because we do know that often with people, when they're changing roles and changing positions or employers, often it can be around there being a mismatch between key values, between what the employer's key values are and what the employee's key values are. So thinking about what's really important to you, trying to put a bit of a list together in terms of, well, what's most important, what are some of the key things, what are some of the things that I probably really wouldn't want to negotiate on in terms of the employer that I'm looking for and the type of role that I'm looking for as well. I think that those really key things are really important to be able to identify and be able to articulate in terms of what you're looking for. Okay. Often part of the application process is having awareness of both your strengths and your weaknesses. Now, we often see a lot of applications, I guess, that will list key strengths. Obviously, most people aren't going to be listing weaknesses, but in terms of your written application, often there's an indication of strengths and what you would consider your strengths. But I think one of the things that often is missing is some of the evidence behind, well, how does that strength manifest itself, or where is the evidence of that particular strength and where does it come from? So what I want you to think about is what would you consider 3 of your greatest strengths, for example? See if you can quickly jot those down, even if you can't think of 3 right off the top of your head, even if you can just jot down 1. Then think about, well, where do you use and display that strength? Where do you commonly use that strength, or where does it show itself? Where do you commonly use that? So how do you know it's a strength? What's the evidence that you've got that indicates that it's a strength? So you perceive it as a strength. Does somebody else perceive it as a strength? What sort of evidence do you have that indicates that it is a strength? Maybe it's feedback from others. Maybe it's about performance in a particular area. So really thinking, okay, well, I'm saying this is a strength, but how do I know it's a strength? What's the evidence that I have in my kit bag to say, well, yes, this is a strength? So if you said one of your strengths was communication, for example, or oral communication, interacting with others, well, how do you know that's a strength? You're saying it's a strength, so do you know that? So maybe if it was about interpersonal communication, maybe you've constantly received positive feedback from your supervisors, maybe you've regularly received Employee of the Month in your role at McDonald's, where your role is as a customer service representative. So thinking about, well, where's my evidence? How do I back that up? And thinking also about, well, how does that particular strength make a difference to my employer? So whether it be a part-time role, whether it be through your professional placements, be it even in a volunteer role, how does that make a difference to your employer, the fact that you've got that particular strength? How do you utilise it in that capacity to make a difference in your role? So where would an employer maybe see a difference if they were to employ you and you're bringing that strength? Where might you make a difference to their organisation if you were thinking about that strength? And I think that's the level of detail you've got to start thinking about when you're thinking about the information that you're including, because you need to be able to back up some of this information and strength in terms of, and strengthen your applications with the knowledge of, okay, well, I've got all this information, I've got to be able to back it up. So even if I can put it in writing in my application, I'm still going to have to go to the interview process and back it up again. So you need to really have a really strong knowledge and the evidence behind you in terms of where you're going to draw that information from and be able to back up what you're saying. Another area that is often part of the interview process, whether it's formally as a weaknesses, or it might be broached in terms of challenges you might have faced, areas for development, etc. So again, it's an area that you have to spend some time thinking about as part of the application process. And weaknesses can sometimes put us off. It's like, oh, well, what do I list? You know, I don't want to be, you know, listing something and you know, maybe putting myself out of the running. Now, the reality is we're not perfect. We're human. We all have areas that maybe we need to improve on, areas where we've made mistakes in the past, maybe we've failed at something. So for this sort of space and giving some thought to when you're putting together your applications, and in part of that preparation process is to really think about a time when maybe you've had to overcome an obstacle, or maybe you've in the past identified an area for self-development, an area that you felt was a weakness and that you've had to put into play something to improve on in that particular area. Maybe you've received feedback or gone through a performance management process with an employer where you've received feedback about an area that needed to be improved. Maybe you've failed at something. So thinking about that and then thinking, okay, well, what did I do to deal with that particular situation in my past? What were the things that I put into place? What were the strategies that I used to deal with that particular situation? I received that feedback from my employer that I needed to improve in this particular area. So what did I go back and do? And so often when you're being asked about areas of weakness by employers, it's really about having that self-awareness and that commitment, I guess. One, awareness that you have got areas for improvement. We're not perfect. You might make mistakes. They're expecting that you might make a mistake. So having that, taking that responsibility for things that might go wrong, but also having the knowledge in terms of and the skills to know that how you would deal with that, and that commitment to your ongoing professional development and things like that as well is really important. So really thinking around those particular things when it comes to it. Now, in terms of experiences, one of the things that I wanted to mention here is that obviously experience is important to your employers, and that you will come from with a variety of experiences maybe to the job application process. So these experiences might be professional experiences if you've had the opportunity to have placements or clinical placements or professional placements as part of your program. That's excellent. So it gives you the opportunity to demonstrate your professional skills that you will bring. So don't miss that opportunity to obviously include your professional placement experiences within your applications, and don't just assume that because you've been in a professional placement, that you've done a placement, you've listed the organisation, you've listed your role, that that's all you need to list. You still need to provide the detail in terms of showcasing the professional skills that you've developed. If you've had placements over the duration of your course from first year, second year, and then up to third year, etc., you really want to showcase the development of your skills over that period of time. Not just repeating information, but showing the growth of your skills development over the duration of your different placements. So you really want to highlight that when you're listing your professional placements information. I think one of the common errors that people tend to make is that they assume that just because they've been in a role similar to the position that they're applying for, that they don't need to provide the information or the detail around that position, because the people will know that I've got those skills because I've done the same sort of role. And you often find the same error for people that are applying for maybe a job within their own internal organisation that maybe they've been acting in, or maybe they've been filling on a contract basis. And it's not uncommon for those people to miss out on the permanent position that then gets advertised and that they've applied for, because they've wrongly assumed, well, they know that I can do the job, I've been doing it already. They haven't gone that extra step and actually documented in their application about that process, and that's often what lets them down, because all the applications need to be assessed on the same information that's coming through. So regardless of that, you've done it before, that you know the members of the panel, for example, they've still got to assess you on the information that they have in front of them. So it's really important that you don't assume that they're going to know the information, that you include that information. So that's around your professional experiences. The other experiences that it's really important to think about is, well, what are the other experiences that you bring to the table as well? So these are things like your other paid employment opportunities, things to bring money through the door, part-time roles, other full-time roles that maybe aren't related to the area of study that you're undertaking. Could be volunteer experiences, it could be community activities, all those other experiences that you might bring. So thinking about all those other activities that you might engage in, it's really important to really sit down and think about those, and think about those experiences in terms of the skills that you have gained from those experiences again, and thinking about the experiences from those experiences in terms of those skills is the really important aspect here. Again, it's about showcasing the skills that the employer is looking for from those different experiences. So where your position titles, etc., don't relate to the position that you're applying for, you really need to focus on the skills and showcasing how you've made a difference within those organisations, and showcase those skills more so than listing duties that aren't relevant for the position that you're applying for. So it's really about thinking about all of your experiences and utilising it to maximise your opportunities to sell yourself to the employer, and that's when it's about looking for those transferable skills. They're embedded in all of your studies, they're embedded in all of your different experiences. These are the skills that will transfer from one experience to another, regardless of what that actual role is. And they're the things that, that employers are looking for, that were in those top 10 criteria that employers were looking for that we showcased yesterday. Things like your communication skills, your leadership skills, your technical skills, your teamwork skills. All of those skills are transferable skills that you develop through all your different experiences in your life, and that you can draw from to showcase and sell to an employer. So thinking about those sorts of skills more so than the actual duties that will be relevant to the position that you're applying for. So don't dismiss those experiences. And really think about those. Start putting together a bit of a list before you even start putting together your applications, etc. Think about all the experiences that you've had, then make a choice around what things that you want to include in your applications, and what are some of the experiences that are going to best sell you to the employer in terms of the types of skills and that you utilise within those roles. I've kind of tapped on this in the last one, which I often want to do, in terms of your identifying your skills. So my idea is to really do a brainstorm, I guess, in terms of what the employer is looking for, thinking about how you performed in those experiences that you've identified. What was it that you did? Or what were the skills that I used to actually perform that duty? And how do I know that I did that well? Thinking about, well, how did I make a difference? How do I know that when I got to the end of the day, I performed the things that I was required to do? What was the difference that I made to that organisation? Why was it that the employer didn't fire me from that particular role? I was obviously performing pretty well, but how do I know that? How did the employer know that I was performing well in that role? What did I do to make a difference to that particular organisation? Is there any evidence that I can show in my information in terms of how I made a difference to that particular employer in terms of the performance of my duties? Was it feedback from my supervisor? Was it feedback from the people and my patients that I was interacting with, or the customers that I was interacting with? Was it an increase in sale? Was it a lack of something? Was it a lack of errors? Was there a lack of complaints? Was there a lack of accidents and injuries? So sometimes it's about the absence of things as well that shows that there's evidence that you were doing what you were doing and you were doing it well. So I think it's not always about the presence of something, sometimes it could be the absence of things as well. So really thinking about identifying your skills. Now, we've referred to yesterday some resources in terms of the employability skills, and there's a really good little resource in there in terms of a nice little tick and flick kind of sheet to go through and identify your skills. So don't forget about those resources that we mentioned yesterday. You'll find links to all of those if you went in yesterday's session under the resources section within Career Hub. And similarly, if you're looking for another values activity, I should have mentioned earlier, you'll find a values activity within that resources section with Career Hub as well, if you want to try another type of values identifying activity as well. But just thinking about just doing a brainstorm around all your different experiences and highlighting those transferable skills. Put in your mindset transferable skills over duties, and put together and identify the skills that you would be able to highlight from your different experiences that you can then showcase in your applications as well. Okay. The other area, I guess, that you really need to work on, I guess, when it comes to translating that information, it's about how you put that information across. And this is where it comes down to writing your achievement statements. Julie and I stress this a lot throughout our application processing workshops, that side of things, and you'll often hear us talking about it in both resumes and selection criteria and those sorts of things. So don't be, you will probably come across it in some of our other workshops as well. But these are just a couple of tools that might assist you in terms of putting together these sorts of statements when you're trying to indicate the level of skill that you might bring, or how you might have made a difference to an organisation, or where you're trying to showcase a particular skill set and provide some evidence behind it. Often it's not enough to just say that you've got a skill, you've got to back it up with some evidence or to show where you developed it, how you developed it, or how it made a difference. So one of the strategies that you can use is to start with a verb written in past tense, state what you did, and then link the value or benefit with words such as by, which, that, etc. So for example, completed XYZ project within allocated timelines and budgets, resulting in a 20% increase in production. Actively engaged with customers, utilising active listening skills, which contributed to a reduction in customer complaints. Wrote a weekly blog post on topics relating to site and study in the area of accounting, reaching an audience of 600 followers after 3 months. So again, it's just thinking about, well, how can I provide some evidence to the skill set that I'm saying that I've got? Is there anything that I've got? Thinking about your, even your results from your assessment can be potentially utilised, as a means of backing up some of your statements sometimes. So just thinking about how you might be able to put across some of that information. And this same kind of achievement sort of thinking and putting that information has a lot more weight than just using superfluous kind of terms. It's about giving some real facts and some real evidence to the information that you're saying. Another strategy around this process, and this is one that you'll see in a lot of job application information from different companies. They will often refer to this as a strategy to utilise when addressing selection criteria, for example. And you can still utilise the same approach when putting together your achievement statements. So And it might be a slightly shortened version in that your situation and your task to some degree are the position that you're and the employer that you're currently with, but you might have had to perform a particular task or a particular duty. And so thinking about, well, what that duty was, what did I actually do? What was the skill that I actually used in order to perform that duty? And again, what was the result that showed that I actually achieved that outcome, or that I did that, that I achieved what I was saying I was going to do. So really thinking around that result or that reflection in terms of, okay, well, how did I make a difference? It's really important. Again, for a lot of employers, they're looking at your applications in terms of evidence of past behaviour being an indication of future performance within their organisations as well. So that's where putting the evidence behind some of your information is really important. So thinking about your skills and trying to put them in terms of your achievement statement is a really important part of the process as well. Okay, here's another little technique, which I think it'll also be utilised in a similar sort of context as well. And this is developing up your elevator pitch. Now, being conscious of the time, I don't want to keep you for too much longer, so I will show you where this resource is and you can work through it in your own time. But essentially, it's thinking about who you are, what do you do, why are you unique, what are your unique selling points, and what are your goals? So we've covered off on a few of these different things, even just as part of this session. So you want to already be able to put some of this together just based on the information that we've chatted about today already. So you can start to put some of this information together. And you know where the area that I think this would be really valuable, it's useful in interviews in terms of sometimes you'll just get asked those introductory questions at the beginning of interview of tell us about yourself. And this is where this comes in really handy. But another area that I think it could be really well utilised is in terms of putting together your career objective or your career goal that goes at the top of your resume. This is a great way to personalise that information, to show what your unique selling points are, to give a bit of a summary, and to match in and add in your career goals and linking it to the employer. So I think it's a great little strategy that you could utilise, a great little technique to really think about that process. So I'm going to just swap my share so I can show you where it's at. And it's a tool within our careers toolkit. So hopefully raise your hand if that's swapped over okay and you can see the elevator pitch builder. They're okay. Excellent. So this is a great little tool that you can go through. You can go through it as many times as you like in terms of creating your elevator pitch. So I'm just going to click you through it quickly and then you can come back and access it at any time you like. So it's accessible through the Careers Toolkit within Career Hub. So the reason it might get a bit clunky here, so we'll just see how we go. So it takes you step by step through the process of thinking, well, who am I? So thinking about what you might actually draft up into that space. It's got some really good little examples. So it's got some business related examples. So if you're using it more in terms of the context of those achievement statements, etc. But it's also got some good examples for a new grad in here as well. And it's not, I seem to want to click over. I'm having issues. So here's an example for, say, for example, for a grad putting something together maybe for a position. So talking about their study in this context. So I'm going to click you through. So that's the who am I. Now I just want to show you the what do I do. Again, I'm going to try and get you through to the examples just to show you, say, the grad example. Here. So here it goes into a little bit more detail around their course or even bringing in their part-time employment, for example. And here you might bring in some placement information, for example. So again, a good idea, a good way to do about that. What are my unique selling points? Again, great, useful in those. It's got power words there that you can have a look at as well. So it's a really handy little tool that you can work through. A bit clunky on my screen. takes a while to think about it. But you get the idea. Sorry, my screen's being a bit clunky and I don't think it's clicking through all that well. But jump in, have a look. It takes you through that little process, and it's a great little technique, I think, that could be really utilised by you as you're putting together your applications, getting together that information, that key information about yourself that you're going to utilise when you're interacting with employers, be it in an interview situation, be it in a networking situation, or that you can also utilise in your applications as well. And go back to my other screen. I think we're almost at the end, so I don't want to keep you any longer. So hopefully that's the end of my slideshow. Hopefully you've managed to take away some ideas, a different perspective from today, engaged in some of that, hopefully that the importance of that self-awareness, and started to obviously get engaged with that in terms of some of the activities that we've done today as well. I will try and see the chat. I'm sure Julie's been all over the chat, but if there's any other questions, let me know. Thanks very much for your attention. As always, glad to be able to assist, and please hope to see you at the next webinar.